When we hear the word gladiator, an image instantly comes to mind: the vast Colosseum, roaring crowds, and brutal combat to the death. Popular culture, from films to novels, has cemented this vision of gladiators as doomed warriors, fighting until their final breath for the entertainment of Rome. Yet the historical reality is far more nuanced and far more surprising. The majority of gladiators survived their battles. Their contests followed rules. Their lives carried significant value, and the entire system of gladiatorial games was rooted not in senseless slaughter, but in economics, politics, and cultural spectacle. In this program, we will uncover who gladiators truly were, why they mattered to Rome, how their fights were staged, and why death in the arena was the exception rather than the rule. By looking beyond the myths, we discover that gladiators were both victims of circumstance and professionals in their own right. They existed at the intersection of entertainment, violence, and survival, and their world reveals much about the complexities of Roman society itself. The origins of gladiators reach back to the Etruscans, whose funeral rites included ritual combats. These symbolic sacrifices evolved under Roman influence into one of the greatest public entertainments in history. Gladiators came from different backgrounds. Many were slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals condemned to fight, but not all were forced into the arena. Some were auctorati, free men who voluntarily signed contracts to become gladiators. They sought wealth, glory, or simply a chance to transform their lives. A gladiator was not a random fighter thrown into combat. He was a trained professional. Gladiators were housed in special schools called ludi, where they underwent rigorous preparation. They learned distinct fighting styles, built physical strength, and often trained for years before entering the arena. These schools were not only places of training, but also of discipline and order. Gladiators lived under strict rules, often in confined quarters, overseen by trainers who were themselves former fighters. Daily life was harsh, but it forged them into resilient and skilled performers, capable of captivating thousands when they finally stepped into the arena. To maintain a gladiator required a considerable investment. Owners provided food, medical care, weapons, and trainers. Archaeological evidence even shows that gladiators followed a specialized diet, rich in grains and legumes, designed to maximize stamina and recovery. For an owner, whether a wealthy aristocrat or the state, a gladiator represented capital. To lose a fighter in his very first match meant losing months, even years, of training costs. As a result, preserving gladiators' lives was often in the best financial interest of those who staged the games. The longer a gladiator lived, the more profit he could generate. A skilled fighter became a household name, drawing spectators and bets, and increasing the prestige of his owner. In simple economic terms, death cut off revenue, while survival sustained it. This financial reasoning also explains why successful gladiators were sometimes insured, with contracts protecting the owner from total loss. Records suggest that sponsors could even receive compensation if a valuable gladiator died in combat. Such arrangements further encouraged organizers to avoid unnecessary fatalities. Contrary to the chaotic bloodbaths we often imagine, gladiatorial combats were carefully structured. Gladiators were divided into classes, each with distinct armor and weapons. The retiarius, armed with a net and trident, often faced the secutor, equipped with a sword and shield. The heavily armored myrmillo clashed with the agile thriax, wielding a curved blade. These pairings were deliberate, creating balance and spectacle. Matches followed rules and were overseen by referees. A fight could be stopped if one gladiator was badly injured, or could no longer defend himself. Victory did not necessarily mean killing an opponent. It often meant disarming or forcing him to surrender. The popular idea of the thumbs down gesture, deciding life or death, is largely a Hollywood invention. In practice, organizers and audiences tended to spare worthy fighters. To kill a gladiator who had fought bravely was wasteful, both economically and culturally. Archaeological findings of gladiatorial armor reveal just how carefully these contests were designed. Helmets with narrow eye slits, limited vision, shields dictated fighting styles, and pairings were engineered for drama rather than chaos. Each bout was less a random clash and more a choreographed test of endurance, strategy, and showmanship. Gladiatorial games were more than entertainment. They were tools of politics and social control. Emperors and politicians staged games to win favor with the masses, offering both excitement and distraction. Crowds came for drama, for skill, and for suspense, not necessarily for death. Spectators followed popular gladiators almost as sports fans do today, admiring their courage and anticipating their next match. Too many deaths could dampen this enthusiasm, depriving the public of its favorite performers. The phrase "panem et circenses," bread and circuses, captures this perfectly. Games provided food for the body and spectacle for the mind. But spectacle required continuity, not senseless annihilation. For emperors, the arena was also a stage for propaganda. By sponsoring lavish games, rulers could display their wealth and generosity, presenting themselves as guardians of the people. Sparing gladiators after hard-fought matches reinforced the image of the emperor as merciful, further strengthening his popularity. Over time, myths have overshadowed reality. Myth 1: every fight ended in death. Reality: the mortality rate of gladiators was around 10% per match. That is still high, but far below what is often imagined. By comparison, medieval jousts were statistically more dangerous. Myth 2: all gladiators were slaves. Reality: many were volunteers, willingly entering contracts for fame or fortune. Myth 3: women never fought. Reality: historical sources confirm the existence of female gladiators, though they were rare and often performed for novelty. Thus, the games were far closer to a regulated sport or spectacle than to the relentless bloodletting depicted in popular media. These myths largely arose centuries later, shaped by writers, artists, and eventually filmmakers who emphasized violence to capture audiences. What survives in popular imagination is less a faithful account of Roman reality and more a reflection of later society's fascination with blood and drama. While rare, death was not absent from the arena. Some combats were intended as executions. Criminals sentenced ad gladium were forced to fight, usually without training, and their deaths served as public punishment. At times, emperors or officials demanded greater bloodshed to make a political statement, using mass slaughter to intimidate or display absolute power. Still, such cases were exceptions. The everyday matches of professional gladiators were designed for endurance, not extermination. In fact, Roman writers often criticized rulers who pursued excessive bloodshed, seeing it as cruelty rather than strength. Public opinion valued skillful, suspenseful combat, and excessive killing risked alienating the very citizens the games were meant to please. Despite their hardships, gladiators could achieve remarkable fame. Their images adorned mosaics, frescoes, and graffiti. Crowds chanted their names. Wealthy admirers sent gifts, and some gladiators became icons of masculine bravery. A few even inspired romantic devotion among women of the elite. The most successful gladiators could be rewarded with the rudies, a wooden sword symbolizing freedom. Some retired to train new fighters. Others enjoyed wealth and recognition. And one, Spartacus, transcended the arena entirely, leading the most famous slave revolt in Roman history. The celebrity status of gladiators also made them cultural symbols. They embodied courage, endurance, and defiance of death. For a society obsessed with honor and spectacle, these qualities elevated gladiators beyond mere entertainers, turning them into enduring legends of Rome. So why did gladiators rarely die in the arena? The answer lies in economics, spectacle, and politics. Owners needed their investment to survive. Audiences craved drama more than blood. And rulers used games as a means of control, not mass extermination. Gladiators were, in many ways, the professional athletes of their age, part warriors, part performers, part pawns in the vast theater of Roman society. Pause, calm tone. When we think of gladiators, we imagine death. But in truth, their survival was what made them legends. They fought not simply to die, but to endure, to captivate, and sometimes to win their freedom. The story of gladiators reminds us how societies balance violence and entertainment, power and mercy. Rome's arenas may have fallen, but the fascination they inspire proves that the line between sport, spectacle, and survival is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.